Morning.
Morning.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Sunday morning. New one. Bit weird normally having a cup of coffee in my hand. Well, a cup of coffee in my hand instead of a pint of beer, but anyway.
It is, yeah.
We shall adjust.
Quite early.
It is. But no, Rob, thanks for joining me, mate. It's a great topic, to be fair. It's something that I really don't know much about. It's something that I think there's a lot of people in the audience that will probably have a lot of questions for you this morning. So not the nicest topic to discuss, unfortunately, because it can, as we all know, result in, fatalities or losing fish, but definitely something I want to talk about. But yeah, thanks for coming on, mate. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about obviously QT and fish, something that you've got quite a bit of experience on and a strong background. So, I mean, it's going to be probably about an hour. We might run over, but if obviously people ask, the more questions people ask, the longer we'll stay on for. We're both in with that? We're both up for that?
Yeah, I'm okay for time.
No.
So I'm
Cool.
not
Thank you. Right, so we'll do what we normally do, and we'll say hello to everybody that's made the effort to join us this Sunday morning. Thanks again to everybody. So we've got Lee's joined us this morning. Morning, mate. Thanks for coming on. And we've got morning, Lee. UKM 120. Morning. Thanks for joining us. There's probably still a few people in bed getting up. The alarm going off. Here's one of them. My good friend Liam. Oh dear, it's an hard life living into being in bed at this time. Thanks for joining us, mate. Dave, morning, Dave. Thanks for joining the chat. Thanks for the support as always. Morning, Gaz. Thanks for filling my WhatsApp inbox with your pictures of your tank for the last 20 minutes. That's pretty silent. Bless him. But no, it looks good. Looking forward to doing a video with him. Critical Reef, morning. This worked out perfectly. The wife and the daughter have gone to a horse show and left me at home to do a water change and listen to this. Happy days. Well, I hope the water change goes according to plan. I've got 300 litres to do this afternoon. Can't wait. No. Anyway. I really need to get that auto water change started like you. I really do, Rob. I really do, mate. Morning, Rennie's Reef. Thanks for joining us, mate. Happy Sunday to everybody. And we've also got Jupiter's Reef in the house. Welcome. So, that's everybody checked in so far. I've got 12 watching. I know it's not the same as a Friday night, but it's a good effort. So thank you ever so much again to everybody. So, Rob, can we start with you? Give us a little insight in terms of your background, please.
Well, my background is I started off with a zoology degree. I went on and did a master's in parasitology and ecology and biology of disease vectors. I went on and did a PhD basically around malaria, and with a bit on West Nile virus. And so my whole sort of academic research career is based around zoonotic diseases, essentially. So obviously when I got into this hobby and discovered about the diseases that we can get in fish, and the outcomes are pretty grim a lot of the time, I just took an interest because it's always interested me. And so I've just read up on it and I decided which I thought was the best protocol for me with my tank. And I did some experiments, which probably most people don't do, but I set up empty tanks, for example, with hypo in it to see how difficult it is to keep it at a set point. So I did that for a couple of weeks, decided it's a pain in the ass, so I didn't go down that route. I looked at the copper, I looked at chloroquine phosphate. And then I decided which was best for me, because I think the important thing is if you are going to go down the QT route, you got to pick something that's manageable for your lifestyle, the amount of room you've got, the amount of money you got. You know, there's no good going. I want to go. Yeah, exactly. I want to follow this amazing protocol if you haven't got the money, the time, the space to do it, because it's going to fail. So you're better off doing something not quite as harsh or not quite as strict in protocol terms, but doing it well and doing it for everything, rather than trying to do something that's kind of out of your level.
So a bit like maintaining a reef tank in general then, in terms of parameters?
Yeah, it's really, yeah. And I think the other thing is I mean, the main guy really in this hobby for fish QT, so I think he's Bobby Miller, Humble Fish.
Right.
Amazing, you know, and that kind of, that whole forum there is the absolute wealth of knowledge, and that's where I went And I dug into that, and then I did what I always do. I go off, I research all the scientific literature, and I see what's going on there, and then I kind of bring them together, and I just sit down and think what makes sense to me and what is attainable in the UK, because lots of the stuff that you see out there involves medications which are not available in the EU and certainly not in the UK. So,
right, okay.
So a lot of the protocols they talk about, they're not applicable to people in the UK. Yeah, so I did all that, and then I came up with my protocol, and that's what I used. I picked something that I could use for everything, so all species of fish can go through the same protocol, because I didn't want to have to swap and change. Because I think the important thing about trying to be successful, if you want a QT, is to be consistent, and you know, and to not kind of chop, because it's a learning curve. And if you're putting your fish, you don't want to kill them by trying to save them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
You want to be successful in your QT regime, so you want to pick something which gives you success. It makes you feel more confident, and then as you go along, you know, you get better and better, and you might be able to tweak it a bit, and you can see things with certain fish. But essentially, it's about picking something that's going to work for you. I mean, at the end of the day, let's face it, Tom, 90% of people in this hobby don't QT at all, do they? They just plop and drop. So
plop and drop. I've not heard that before.
Plop and drop.
Plop and drop. Plop
and
drop.
You know, we can't sit here and go, you will not have a successful reef tank if you don't QT, because it's plainly wrong. You will, because most people out there do have. I just think there's a kind of a line where, when I look at people who have really exceptional fish selection in their tank, I mean, top of my head, you look at like Polo Reef that he's got over there. I mean, I know that's like the upper, but even people Viking Reef. Do you know Viking Reef? He's got YouTube.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So, you know, he's got some fantastic fish. He QTs all his fish. So there's certain people out there that do a very good job. I mean, even Ryan, he's just QT'd all his fish, Prestige Reef, isn't he? Because he had a
issue before.
He had the ick, didn't he, or something? So so you know, most people won't do it. Can you improve the life of your fish? I think so. I think it's also important to just appreciate what fish you want, because certain fish. I mean, I literally posted a video 30 minutes ago on Insta with my fish. You know, if you look at the fish I've got, I'm 100% sure I would not have that collection of fish in that tank if I didn't QT them. Just because I've got, you know, Achilles tang, powder blue tang, Naso tangs, you know, and I just don't think you would get that group of fish together if you didn't go through a QT regime, which is why I did it. So that's where I am.
Cool, thanks for that. And what do you think the main, I suppose, the main flaws of the current hobby in terms of people not QTing this fish? What do you think the most? I suppose, what do you think what I'm trying to say is, what steps can people make to make their life easier when it comes to adding fish to a system, roundabout fashion?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing would be, I mean, the most common reasons for people not QTing is I haven't got the room.
Yeah. So another tank, you mean by that?
Yeah. So another whatever salt bucket, or I haven't got the time. And another big one is I tried it and I killed more fish trying to QT them than I did not.
Right, okay.
They seem to be like the main sort of arguments of why people are not QTing their fish. They're all valid, you know. Some people don't have the room, some people don't have the time. And it's an individual choice, isn't it? You know, I'm not in here to preach people you need to QT your fish. I'm just saying, I think you end up with a better long-term end result if you make the effort early on. So,
okay, cool. What have got here? Liam, I used to QT until I found out that some of the diseases can survive on snail shells, frag plugs, etc., just not directly from fish. I don't have the space to do my QT for everything, unfortunately. I think that's the most common, isn't it? Everybody, like you say, it's the time, it's the space, it's physically having another tank. I think one thing I can think. Go on. I was just going to say, the one thing I think you can make life easier with is to try and source all your fish in a shorter space of time, if it's a new setup, and use your new setup as a QT tank in a sense, which I kind of did on the DT behind me, not intentionally. I brought in 3 groups of fish that had been in 3 different systems. There was no livestock, there was i.e. corals, inverts or anything. So I could treat the tanks, and I had to treat the tank. And fortunately, I could. So it was almost my DT became a QT for a short space of time.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, a fowler tank's a lot easier, isn't it? And if you got disease in a mixed reef tank, it's incredibly difficult to get that rectified without major disruption to your tank. Especially if you've got some nice SPS corals in it. It's really difficult. But I mean, the point I would make is, firstly, no QT is 100%. Doesn't matter how well you do it.
On its got.
Right. So you need to be realistic. All you're doing is you're pushing your probabilities of having success towards in the right direction. So, all right, I could bring in a frag and it might have some little parasite encrusted on it, but the chances of that are minuscule compared to going to my LFS, buying a fish, chucking it in my tank.
Yeah.
They're 2 ends of the spectrum. So if I can get rid of the large probability and I'm just left with the small probability that one day I might bring in a snail or a frag with something on it, I'm still vastly increasing my chances of being successful with the fish in my tank than not doing anything. So I understand the argument, but everyone needs to be aware that QTing fish and corals and everything else is never 100% anyway. It's impossible.
Well, you've just took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say it's no different to dipping a coral, is it? A frag before you put it in your tank.
Exactly. Yeah. So all you're doing is you're trying to increase your chances of, even
success.
If it does get, that's it. And even if it gets in there, it's at a level that's so low that hopefully you're not going to have a massive outbreak. Because if you put in a frag, it's not going to be smothered like a fish could be. You may be very unlucky to have 1 or 2 cysts on it. And they're on the plug anyway, because they're not going to insist onto living tissue. So if you cut your plugs off, clean-up crew is slightly different, because I don't think many people are going to set up a tank and put their clean-up through, like snails especially, for 3 months before they put them in a display.
I was about to ask you, what is your because I've read quite a few sort of papers and topics on this. What's your standard QT sort of period then? 30 days or 3 months, 90 days, is it? What's the actual
clean-up crew?
Well, for fish and clean-up crew, just as an example, what would be the sort of length, the period, the timeline?
Well, I mean, the period of time varies depending on what particular method you're using. I mean, copper you can do in 14 days. A lot of people do 30 days. I did the tank transfer, the hybrid tank transfer, which is 12 days. But then after I do probably 2 weeks of observation. Clean-up crew, initially when I set my tank up, I did a minimum of 3 months.
Wow.
So I had a Red Sea Nano set up, and I used to buy a set of clean-up crew and just put them all in there. It was a fish list system, obviously. And I just sat there for free. But I wasn't in a rush. So it wasn't my first tank. So I can understand 99% of people are not going to do that. Shrimps are easier, because what I found with shrimps is if you buy them and you chuck them in freshly made salt, they tend to shed their ectoskeleton completely. Normally within 48 hours. Yeah. And then anything that was obviously encrusted on that exoskeleton is gone, and then you can whip them out and put them in a display. So that works quite well.
Didn't ever knew that.
Yeah. So yeah.
And what sort of advice do you think you could give, not necessarily just the viewers, but people setting up a new system in terms of methodology of putting new fish into a new system? What sort of steps do you think people should take?
Well, I mean, it depends where they are. I mean, I would, even as a basic thing, I would do probably 2 weeks of observation, just in a bare bones tank with a hang on a back filter, bit of PVC pipes and a heater, and it just gives you the chance to not bring in something gruesome like velvet, for example, and ick. I mean, you're looking at there's 5 main. You got ick, velvet, Uranema, brook, and flukes.
Yeah.
They're the kind of the main 5. I mean, there are different exotic things, but you know, they're the things that most hobbyists are going to come across on a sort of regular basis. And so if you put a fish into obs, I mean, the other difficult thing is that you have to do, obviously, as a hobbyist, is you have to realise when a fish is sick.
Yeah, true.
So,
you know,
because you know, someone who's oblivious to what like flukes, for example, gill flukes, or you know, just skin flukes look like, and if the fish is not really exhibiting any behaviour, you know, it's not flashing, it's not gasping, you know, so it's got a parasite load where it's not really displaying any bad symptoms, most people will not pick that up anyway.
Let me see if I can find some pictures while we're talking about it. So you're talking about flukes then. So which do you think is the most common one? Because I would say it's probably going to be white spot, isn't it? It's going to be ick. Would you say, or would you not? Would you disagree?
I think a lot of flukes get through undetected. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, you know, when you go through the forums and people that are showing pictures of sick fish, ick is definitely probably up there on the top.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite visible, and the symptoms when a fish has got a heavy load is, you know, quite clear that it's acting out of character. So they're quite easy to pick up. There is some difficulty between ick and velvet visually for some people. You know, the amount and size of the spots are slightly different. Velvet acts a lot quicker. Velvet sends out sort of a rhizome that goes right deep into the tissue of the fish, causes more harm. I mean, the spots are not actually the parasite. It's just the reaction that the fish has had to the parasite. But I mean, the fortunate thing about ick and velvet is they are reasonably easy to treat, and there's lots of different methods you can use to treat them. So you can use, like I've got just on hand, never used it because it's still sealed, but that's copper powder. So
yeah. I've
got
a bottle of that.
Yeah, I mean, they're just handy to have should things go south rapidly. I'm not a fan of copper because I find it's hard work.
Yeah.
And it's a so the other thing about copper is I mean, it's great, it works fine unless you've got a copper resistant parasite or some other thing. Copper power is chelated copper, so it's better than cupramine, which I don't know, I have no idea why we can't buy that in the UK. I don't know what the regulations are. I don't know whether the company that makes it just can't be bothered to fill out the paperwork so it can export it into the EU or the UK. I can't really see any reason it would be banned as being a harmful toxic substance, because you can buy a cupramine, which is unchelated copper. But the advantage to this is, one, it's kind of gentler on the fish. You can still use a UV with that, whereas you can't with the other. It turns it toxic. And I can't remember. I was going in the conversation, really. What was I talking about?
You're fine. Well, just rewind a little bit. So, if you were, like I say, new hobbyist or existing hobbyist, and you want to go out and buy fish from an LFS, what would your sort of advice be? Because I mean, I've always sort of, whenever I speak to people, including myself, who've had issues, obviously recently with my QT in the garage, it seems to the more different places that you're bringing fish from, i.e., you know, different water systems or setup, you are potentially increasing would you disagree, increasing your chance of having an issue? So what I'm saying is, somebody has an established tank, or they've had it for however many months, and they walk to LFS and go, oh, I like that fish, and then they take that fish home, or it might not be their LFS, it might be a different shop they've gone into, bring it home, no QT, plop and drop, to use your analogy, straight in. And then quite often I'll hear people that say, I've had problems because that fish I brought in has been a carrier, or, you know, has caused issues, or is stressed for the fish out, so then they've had issues.
Yeah, I mean, I would say don't do that.
No, but a lot of people do because they shop with their eyes, don't they? Not with their head, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and that's fine, but you got to obviously take the element of risks that you're going to infect your display if you do that. And I think the thing is about when you stock your tank, you put your first fish in, it looks good. You put your second fish in, looks good. At some point, when you've got a big fish load, you're increasing your risk every time. That if the next fish has got, if you put your first fish in and it's got ick and it dies, you can let your tank go fallow. You can raise your temperature up to 30. You can get it done in 2 weeks if you want, or you can keep it at 25 and wait for 76 days or whatever they say.
Yeah.
But every time you increase your fish load, then you're increasing the chances of, if you do introduce a sick fish, then you're not just dealing with one sick fish, are you? You've got a whole raft. And the thing is you got to look at your fish tank in terms of parasites, because a parasite is basically in the biological world. There's two reproductive strategies. You've got an R and a K strategy. Humans, for example, K strategies, we have very few offspring and we invest a lot of time to raise them. Parasites, insects, some rodents, for example, are our strategies, and their strategy is it's a numbers game. We will produce millions of offspring or hundreds of thousands of offspring in the hope that one or two of them will make it through and get to carry on. So in a fish tank, you don't have the dilution effect that you obviously get in the ocean. The ocean is vast. Even though the fish are confined to a reef, it's still a vast amount of water for an ick parasite is about 12 to 15 microns. It's tiny. So if you think of how difficult it is for that parasite to come out of the sand on the reef and then get into that water current and actually attach to a fish, it's amazing. In your tank, it's a whole different. It's absolute heaven for a parasite because it's confined. And all it's doing is constantly circulating around, and the more fish you have in your tank, the more chance it's going to attach itself. Exactly. And I think that's why, when you do have an outbreak in a closed system like a reef tank, it can be absolutely devastating because that parasite load, that fish will have never seen that in the wild. So even though it may have come across ick in the wild, and it may have some immunosuppressant against it, the parasite load that we see in our tanks is just way above what it would have ever seen in the wild. So to get back to your point, what would I advise? It's like I said, once if you've got a fowler only tank, then you've got a lot of options because you can just basically treat your display tank like a QT tank, really. Once you start putting corals and it turns into either SPS or a mixed reef, you are just so limited to what you can do other than getting your fish out and QT them separately. Some people have tried hydrogen peroxide dosing in a tank to levels where they can reduce parasites. I think it's had mixed success. So I guess for me the point would be just do what you can to try and make sure that fish is clean before it goes in there. So even an observation tank. And most fish we put in our tanks are not huge. We don't tend to buy 9-inch fish, do we? You're talking 2-3 inches. Most people like to get the small bottom grow, which is good. So that also means that if you want a QT, all you need really is 2 salt buckets. You don't need a lot. You need a couple of salt buckets, a heater, and an air stone. It's very minimal. If you want to just do a very simple tank transfer, it takes you 12 days, and it's just going to save you, a lot of.
Can you talk us through it step by step, then, mate, if you don't mind, while you're on it? So, if somebody wanted to embrace what you're talking about this morning, what would they need? Go to the shed, garage, and find a couple of buckets, a heater, a stone, which I'm sure most of us have got.
So you set up your first bucket. Basically, you put fresh salt water in it, a bubbler in it, bring it up to temperature. You can acclimate your fish, and then you put your fish in your bucket, and then all you do is you keep your fish in your bucket. You feed it very minimally, and if possible, it doesn't need a light over it because it's just stressful. You need something like a bit of piping or something they can hide in, just so it's not stressed completely. And then you take after 72 hours is the maximum. So just coming up to 72 hours, you need to take the fish out, and then you need to remove it and put it in another bucket with fresh salt in. And you can either bleach your heater, and you'll need a fresh air stone, and then move that over to that. Or if you've got 2 heaters, or if the ambient temperature is good enough, obviously you won't need a heater. But you don't want to cross-contaminate anything, obviously. So So what I do when I move my fish, I don't use a net. I use a plastic colander, like a kitchen colander. It's like a sieve almost.
Like a sieve. Yeah.
So I lift the fish out. I just let it drip. I wipe it with some kitchen towel to get as much water as possible, and then I drop it into the next clean, sterile tank. And basically, you do that 4 times. So you move it from one bucket to the next bucket. Each time, it's got to be in there less than 72 hours, and then you'll just clean your first bucket out. Just use bleach. Household bleach is fine, and then dry everything. I think the key to successful tank transfer is if you make sure everything in between the transfers gets bone dry, then you won't have any cross-contamination.
So 2 buckets, ideally 2 air stones, and ideally 2 heaters, or clean them.
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally, if we've got them.
Yeah.
Fill 1 bucket up with fresh salt. Any parameters, salinity or temperature, anything that people need to know about there?
Well, I mean, you don't need to run it at full 35 ppt. You can run it at 33, just to make the salt go a bit further. I mean, I use, my salt is all pre-mixed, so I have it on tap. So mine's at 35, but that's just because that's where it's mixed at. I mean, buy the cheapest salt you can buy if you want to use it for tank transfer, because the fish is only going to be in there for 3 days. If you look in and it looks a little bit cloudy, you can do a water change within that 72 hours just to refresh the water in the bucket with fresh, clean salt water. But essentially, that's it. So 12 days. So you'll do the transfer.
You're changing it over every 3 days. Sorry, so every 3 days.
So
change it into the dip.
Yeah. So what I do is I do my first one, and then I put an alarm on my phone, which will go to like 71 hours, and it just So the other thing is, which is something you don't think about when you first start QTing, and you go to your shop and you pick your fish, or it comes in and you get a call, your fish is in, Rob, do you want to come and pick it up? Is you want to work out when your transfer is going to happen, because they're going to shift slightly throughout the day, because you're coming back from 72 hours each time.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So you don't want to end up going, I've got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do my last transfer. So when you first get your fish, sometimes it's worth sometimes I would just hold it in a tank for 2 or 3 hours, so that when I start my actual tank transfer, the times work out, which is, you just need to fit it in with your lifestyle. So that's just something to bear in mind. But yeah,
and is that a successful route for people to go down, you think, for most people? Because that sounds affordable. When most people get access buckets, whether they don't need to be salt buckets, any bucket, obviously it needs to be clean.
Well, I think the nice thing about that method is you're not using anything that most people don't already have, because they're in the hobby. So you haven't got to go out and buy a copper Hannah checker, for example, which is, I don't know what, 70 quid straight away. Most people have a spare heater. Some people's houses could be warm enough if it's in the summer, you won't even need a heater. And most people have got a couple of salt buckets knocking around. So there's nothing there really which you've got to start to outlay. And then on top of that, with what I did, that's my basic baseline kind of protocol. And then I've added hydrogen peroxide dips into it, and then I've also added praziquantel for worm treatment. And so that kind of does everything I need to do within a 12-day period.
So if people can't mix their own, they don't have the RO machine, or they buy the salt from the LFS, they can obviously use water from the LFS in a barrel. Get a couple of barrels to do it that way.
I mean, technically, you can also say that if you've quarantined everything in your tank and you're confident that your tank water is clear, there's no reason why you can't use your tank water for the tank transfer.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If you're confident that your tank's good and there's nothing in it, then when you do, you can just do little water changes in your main display rather than wasting.
That makes sense.
Good salt. So that's another.
Good.
Another way of
I
doing
hope
it.
that's definitely an eye opener. I didn't realise it was that easy. It's definitely something I think I'll try. That's for sure. Morning, John. Thanks for joining us. Better later than never. John's just put. I think the answer to this question is yes, John. That's kind of key to any QT, isn't it? Contamination or trying to avoid it. So,
I mean, what I do between because I use little glass tanks just because it was convenient for me. So in between, so once I've taken the fish out and it's gone into the next tank, I will hydrogen peroxide that tank out. So I just literally pour some hydrogen peroxide in there, wipe it all around with a kitchen roll, and then fill it with cold tap water, and I chuck citric acid in there, and all the equipment I've used I put in there with the citric acid
at the same time, like a dishwasher in it almost.
Basically, and I might because I use hang on the back filter, and depending on what fish I go, sometimes I have a little power head in there, and so I put that on as well, and I just circulate the water, and I leave that for normally till the next morning, and then I dry everything, and then if it's summer like this,
air dry,
not like this because it's pouring with rain, but if I can take it out and air dry it, I will. If not, I'll dry it in the fish room, but I try and make sure that everything is bone dry before I reuse that tank. So the other thing I'd say is the other slightly annoying thing about QT is these things get bandied around and then taken as gospel, is that I QT'd. I've made a video actually on my channel. I've made a whole video on how I QT'd my fish and the whole process. So to watch that. Everyone says you can't QT your fish in the same room as your display tank. It's got to be 10 foot away, blah, 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 blah. I've read that paper, and that's not factually correct. Technically, yes, you can get ick aerosolized, which will come out of the QT tank and go into your display tank. But if you actually look what I did to achieve that, this is the difference between science. If you set out to prove something in science, you set up an experiment to see if it's possible. So what they did is they took a water that was absolutely infested with ick, and then they put it in a garden sprayer, and then they sprayed it into a massive fan, like huge fan, aerosolized it, so it sprayed across a range of tanks, and then they measured how far the tank. And even then, I think they used 10 tanks. I think only 3 ever got infected. So technically, yes, but if you're if you're QTing your fish and you're chucking your water where you know it's got ick in it into a fan, so it sprays over your display tank, then you're not really a good reefer.
Well, these are the things that many people will do instead of watching England in the Euros. But anyway, apart from last night, fair play.
So I would. The point I'm making is do not be concerned when people go, I can't QT because I can't do it far enough away from my display tank. I did every fish in my display tank less than 2 meters away from it. You know, my tank's on one side of a garage and my QT system was on the other side. So I don't think,
that is a lot easier than I thought. It's a lot easier than I thought. I've learned something there, definitely something I think I'll try. I
think the other thing about tank transfer, the reason I picked tank transfer because when you do copper, you can't put any eels through copper, seals, pipefish.
Inverts.
A lot of wrasse don't like to tolerate. And then the other thing about copper, I think this is where I've circled right back to finish the conversation I started 10 minutes ago about the copper bear. The other thing about copper is it's immunosuppressant. So even though it's killing the ick parasite or the velvet parasite, that's what you're using it for. If you have anything in your display and then you put that fish, so it's gone through QT, and then you put it in your display and you've got ick in your display, even though it's never manifest, that fish is more susceptible than if you plopped and dropped it because it's immunosuppressed because it's been in copper. So in certain circumstances,
its immune system is low in terms of defense. Is that right? Okay.
So the copper brings it down. So you can argue the point that some people, when they go, I QT my fish, and every time I put it in my display, the QT doesn't work because it gets ick. That is one of the reasons why.
One of the reasons why.
If you've already got the parasite in your display tank and you're putting an immunosuppressed fish in there, you're actually making the situation worse than if you just plopped and dropped it.
Popped and dropped. Like
Yeah.
that.
So with copper, personally, with copper, I would also, after you've done a copper treatment, I would put that fish in an observation tank, just get it feeding, get it happy, get its immune system right back to where it should be, and then put it in the display. That would be my course of action if I was using copper.
So what other methods are there? You've got your tank out, you've got your tank transfer, copper we know about. Anything else that people could do? What about an existing tank? Sorry, to put in there an existing tank. So if somebody's got an existing system, the fish looks a little bit, stressed or not normal. What should they do in that instance?
Well, the easiest way to treat that is to get the fish out.
Yeah.
Which is, it depends on the size of your tank. I mean, someone like you, Tom, and a big tank, someone like me, it's not easy, is it?
No.
To get a fish out. It depends on the fish. Some fish are easier, obviously, if they come up to feed. But if it's like a cryptic fish or a wrasse or something, which is just going to dive straight in the rocks. It's like I said earlier, you are extremely limited to in-tank treatments unless you're a fowler tank.
If you could, hypothetically, if you managed to get it out, you got the floating, I can't remember, the fish catcher, you got it out. What would you do? What should that person be doing then with it? That's such a big fish.
I would just go through. Well, it depends what it was. Are we talking ick, velvet? I mean, the tank.
Unknown. Let's just say somebody doesn't know. Let's just say somebody doesn't know.
Yeah, if it's one of my fish, I would put it through the tank. I'll put it just straight back through the tank transfer method, because the method I use with the hydrogen peroxide, I use the API General Cure. It treats for those. Well, it treats for 4. Uranema is a whole different kettle of fish.
Okay.
Good explain.
Yeah.
Uranema is very difficult, really. As far as I'm aware, I know formalin baths seem to be the go-to for uranema, but it looks like there's 2 different species, and if it's a mild infection which manifests as, they look like kind of sores on the side of the fish, if they're deep and you can get it internal as well, I think once the fish is at that stage, I don't mean anything can cure it.
Right. Okay.
And the other trouble with uranema is, I mean, it's very common in chromis and anthias.
Yeah.
And if you get that in your tank, that's it for life.
You can't get it out. I know. I had that issue with my chromis, because we had, I think it was in the sort of first 3-4 months when they all went in and they all started going through the pecking order in terms of who was in charge. I had one of them, and its tail, nowhere to lie, it was nearly missing, because it created like a sore. I haven't got any pictures of it, or I should share it, like a blister on its tail. And when I was showing, like it was rotting, and when I was showing people who were going, that's uranema, you're absolutely screwed. I was like, oh, great. And my philosophy, and again, it's probably not the right one, but I'm a big believer. I'm not a skinny lad. If you are eating and you are more, like when you were ill and your mum would say, have some of this, or, make sure you're eating, you've got a fighting chance. I think, would you agree that analogy is the same with fish and creatures in the water these days?
Absolutely, yeah, it's all part of being a healthy fish and boosting the immune system. Yeah, diet is like it is for all animals. It is key to being healthy and successful. Yes, I mean, in parasites, you get obligate and facultative parasites. So obligate parasites essentially need a host. They can't live without it. So things like ick and velvet, they need that fish in order to replicate and complete their life cycle. Uranema is facultative, which means if there's fish there, it will feed on a fish. If there's no fish there, it will quite happy to feed on detritus in the bottom of the tank. So that's the problem. So once it's in the tank, you're not getting it out.
It doesn't need a host, is what we're saying.
So it doesn't need a fish. So you can go fallow for months and you'll put a fish in there and it can still get there. So uranema is slightly different from the others. But the other tank transfer method, if you use the protocol that I was, it seems to have worked fine. When I say I tweak it, so certain things, for example, I tweaked it with my nasotangs seem to come in quite heavily infested with internal parasites. So,
really?
Yeah.
What are we talking? How do you know? How would you know that? Sorry, what would you be looking for?
So they have stringy poo. They come in quite pinched in the stomach. They're reluctant to feed. So I put them through 2 praziquantel baths. So the first one I followed I think it's 2.5 parts per million is the dosage they recommend. And I lost that naso. And I cut my fish up when they die because I want to know. And it had internal parasites. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I've still got fish in my freezer, so I wrap them in cling film. And when I get
wow! Remind me not to get on the wrong side of you. I'll wake up in your freezer. Well, not
fish
that
and chips can be interested in this house. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I got the second one, it came in, and it was, to start with, to be honest, it was a bit healthy. It was feeding better, but I upped the dose from 2.5 to 2.75 just in case there was some resistance there. Because praziquantel's been around for donkey's years. I mean, I remember learning about praziquantel because it's used in human disease called schistosomiasis. So it's been around for a long time. So drugs that have been around a long time, obviously.
Spell it for me. Sorry, Rob. Spell it for me. Let me just show everybody that's watching. How am I spelling it? P-A.
What's that? Praziquantel?
Yeah.
I haven't got a bottle. P-R-A-Z.
Oh, I've got it. I've got it. Fluxolve is your most common that I would.
Yeah, you can get that in the UK. Yeah. So Fluxolve is quite. I think that's a 50-50 mix. Fluxolve of praziquantel, and they often bind it to a carrier. I use the API General Cure, which I get on eBay because it comes from the States.
Right. Okay. So, would you recommend that being something that people should have in the old cupboard, like the Harry Potter cupboard, with everything? Yeah.
It's handy to have. Yeah, and I think they've got quite a long shelf life, if I remember rightly.
Yeah. So that's something that you can use. Obviously, it's pictures of koi on there, koi fish, but you can use it in marine. It doesn't have to be a certain brand or whatever. No,
I think there's lots and lots of different brands, but basically it's praziquantel, which is essentially the same chemical. So I used API General Cure because it's a combination and it's a nice powder, and you have the choice of either dosing it in the water, or what I also do with naso tanks is I feed it to them. So I mix it into mastic. So I weigh it mastic, and then I'm, because that fish is in a QT tank and there's no competition for food, I know that he's getting it. So that worked quite successfully on the second one. Yeah, so certain fish
a bit like when you'd give a dog a treat and it's got like a worm tablet in it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do that. I do that with the cheese. I ram it in a piece of cheese, and he's so obsessed that he just takes it straight away. So that's what I would do if you bring in a fish. Yeah, I mean, like I said, in display treatment of ick and velvet in a display tank, like a mixed reef, is, other than the hydrogen peroxide, which I don't think has been completely successful, and I think obviously there are side effects of using that. I don't think really you've got a lot of options.
I mean, 12 days for a tank, 12 days with 2 buckets, and he's I don't think that's. If you let's think about the average price of marine, because it keeps going up. I mean, there's some fish I've seen recently, I'm like, how much? And people are going out and spending it, and I know you could argue it's not really about the money. It's more about the fish and the fish being alive. And, of course it is. They're animals at the end of the day, but they do come with a price tag. Some of them heftier than others.
Yeah.
So I think the point I'm making here is if you're going to want to spend whatever on a really nice price fish that you want for your tank, if you've not got two empty buckets, an eater or two, and a bit of time, then all blame on you, because it's something that I'll definitely have a go at. If I was to bring, I'm not going to bring anything else in the DT, but in the garage, I'll definitely give it a go. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely up to the reefer, the route they choose to go down. If people choose to just plop and drop, that's fine. It's absolutely their decision. But don't come on the forum just going, "Oh my God, I can't believe all my fish has died," when you know the reason why. So you just got to suck it up and then move on, and then either continue what you're doing, like I said, most 90% of reefers do not do any QT whatsoever. And there's a lot of beautiful tanks out there. But I think,
I think it's down to the individual, isn't it? You know, we can all get coughs, sneezes, you know, diseases, and some of us have just.
Well, I think if you take that route, you're going to end up with a tank which is similar to the tank we end up with anyway in terms of corals. You know, after 5 years, your tank basically is a result of the corals that have survived, not always the corals you want. You know,
I agree with that.
Putting them in, you know, certain corals just die, and after the third one, you go, I'm not buying it anymore. And I guess most people are similar with fish. You know, you'll put certain fish in and it die. I mean, you know, certain fish, they must just be killed in their droves in this hobby. You know, copper band butterflies, for example.
Yeah.
You know, the number of people that just don't have success with those fish, and that's not necessarily down to QTing either, is it? Most of that is down to the environment and getting them feeding and the condition they come in. But you know, even with fish like that, you know, I put my copper band right through that same tank transfer method. I mean, it's interesting actually because I put my copper band. I think it was possibly the last fish that went in. So it went in with 17 tanks, and I was like, it's going to be difficult to get this fish in. And it was probably one of the easiest fish. So you can never tell. You know, each fish is individual as well, even in their own personality. So you can never tell what fish is going to give you trouble.
Well, Clive, who I've got now, I must have had him 5-6 years. He was in the garage in an 8-foot tank with 2 other fish, and he wasn't feeding when I first got in. But because there wasn't too many fish in terms of fighting to the food, he started. They're very inquisitive, aren't they? Some of them when they come in, they're a bit like not sure what the food is. And I think it was the other 2 fish literally sort of, as daft as this sounds, almost sort of encouraged him to sample and try what it was. And then it just sort of kick-started from there, and I'm thankful for that because he's one of the highlights of this tank. But one thing I wanted to ask you you talked about a minute ago, diet. You said we want to stay on about diet, you know, giving fish, you know, chance of survival. What's your take on foods out there that contain, should I say, certain ingredients that are meant to be or helpful against infection or disease, like garlic, obviously, we talk about quite often, or we see.
Yeah, my head would go, a fish in the wild's never going to eat garlic, is it?
Yeah, I thought you might say that. Yeah.
That would be my initial.
But we do. They're marketed that way, aren't they? In the hobby, marketed, you know, a bit like sort of vampire, sort of Dracula thing. You know, eat garlic and you'll keep the, you know, keep the disease at bay.
I'm trying to think whether I've actually ever come across an article where they've looked to see whether it does boost the immune system. I mean, because it may contain a chemical in there which boosts immune systems generally across, you know, just biological organisms and not just specifically fish. But I'll put it this way: I've never fed garlic. I do think a variety of food is good, and depending on the fish you've got, obviously. So I've got tang, so I feed nori every day. But I don't actually supplement my food with any multivitamins or Celcon or I don't. But I haven't had to really, because maybe if I saw a fish which was looking emaciated or had a particular problem, then I would try different things. But what I do with my fish is, I mean, for example, when I got the copper band in and I thought it's going to be difficult to get that fish to feed out the water column with 17 tangs smashing all the food. I put him in an acclimation box in my tank, right where I feed the tank. So every time I fed the tank, all the fish would be right there where he's. He's in his acclimation box, but all the fish are right there feeding in a frenzy. Some of the food drifts through, and then he got to feed because he's, like you were saying earlier, he's seen all the other fish go mad. So his brain's gone, that's obviously, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's good.
Yeah, so it's a kind of stimulus, isn't it, for that fish?
Yeah, monkey see, monkey do, really, with mine, which is what happened.
Yeah, And the other thing is the interesting thing I found about when I QT the fish, because I use glass tanks, but they sit parallel to my DT tank. So when I bring in a fish and it goes in a tank, the fish in my display can see it because it's only like 5-6 foot away.
Yeah.
And I can literally, when I put it in there, it comes out the bucket and I drip acclimate it and I put it in the tank. I can literally, they will pause because they're swimming up and down the tank. They will literally pause as if they go, oh, look, we've got a new guy coming in a couple of weeks. so, and obviously the new fish can see all the display and all the fish in there. So I almost treat that as part of the acclimation process as well. Like it's like an introduction of all the fish in my display can see that fish. And obviously when it goes in, they go, well, I've already seen it. I always use an acclimation box anyway, but they get to see it at least 2 weeks, if not 4 weeks, before it actually goes anywhere near their tank. I've got no idea whether that makes any difference or not. But
so, one other thing I want to ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, going back to ick for a second, which I seem to have had more issues with ick in my time in the hobby than anything else. Yeah. Obviously, the telltale signs, fish rubbing, rubbing themselves against rocks, etc., that we always get told to look out for.
Flashing.
Are we right in saying still that you can have a better chance fighting ick if you've got running a bare bottom tank as opposed to substrate?
Biologically speaking, it makes sense to think that, because when they drop off,
they have to go and bury and.
Yeah, they're going to insist, and they want to insist to something that's solid. So obviously, going to get to the current. So yeah, I just think there's just less surface area for them to feel, get out of the current and to insist and sit there happy.
Right. Okay.
That's my. I mean, that's not a reason to go bare bottom. I just think it's just there's pros and cons for bare bottom tanks, but I think that is one of the. I mean, that is one of the reasons I chose to go bare bottom in mine. Because because you can just I've got. Trying to think what I've got 5 MP60s. Got others as well, but I think three of those MP60s just blast the bottom of the tank.
Yeah.
So if I put a chalice or something on the bottom, it's bumping along the bottom of the tank.
John makes his own frozen fish food. Do you make your own, Rob? You make your own food?
Too lazy.
You buy it? Do you buy it in? All that?
I do buy it in.
You buy it in.
I do.
So you freeze fish. You chop fish up. Look inside them. Freeze them. But then you don't make your own food. Okay.
No. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I've looked at it, but I just thought, I do get I get slabs of mysis from Paul at AAC. I don't know if you've seen him. He sells these big, thick slabs. It's not.
I get the ones from BC UK, the big sort of thick ones, like the ocean, like the ocean plankton. But they're a nightmare to chop up. I have to use. I can say it because she's upstairs, but I have to use the bread knife, and I have to just make sure I give it a good clean.
Yeah, I do the same.
Anyway,
when she comes down, it smells. I go, what's that? Yeah.
Has anybody got any questions for Rob on the topic of QTing? Anybody that we've not covered that you'd like to ask, either Rob or myself? Not that I'd probably be able to know the answers, but you've definitely given me something to think about.
The chloroquine phosphate is something that's traction in the last few years. I know Polo Reef did a lot of his fish through chloroquine phosphate. It's just it comes with difficulties particularly in the UK and the EU. I'd imagine you can't get it without prescription, so you've got to try and find a route to obtain it, which is slightly nefarious, really. So there's that problem, and the other problem is you mix up a batch and you have no way of measuring it. So it's not like copper where you can buy a Hanna or even you can measure it. So once you've mixed up your batch, you don't know how quick it's degrading, and you can't measure how quick it's degrading, so you may need to do continual water changes and remixing it. And it's just, I mean, it looks like it's good in what it does, but it's just, I think it's just very difficult and I think it's probably out of the reach for the average hobbyist to use, really, for all of those reasons. So it's a shame because it looks like it's quite effective, but that's also an anti-malarial drug, chloroquine phosphate.
Right, okay.
That's
Right,
how I know
okay.
it.
So Liam's asking you, managing potential disease. Currently, I'm running the big 80-watt D&D UV and running ozone. What else? You run ozone, don't you? You're an ozone guy. You are. I thought you were. But what else could I do to help keep an eye on top of it all? So on top of doing his UV and ozone, anything else you'd advise Liam there, Rob?
No, because that's what I do. I run 2 80-watt UVs. So I run it. You've got to make sure the flow rate is right, because UVs there's a kind of strict dichotomy between either water clarity for a UV or parasite suppression, and the flow rates are completely different. So
it's one or the other, isn't it? One or the other.
You can't do both unless you have 2 UVs, different flow rates, obviously. But you need to check you're running it slow enough to blast the DNA base of that parasite to disrupt it, so it can't replicate.
Flow meter then? Flow meter? Apex flow meter?
I've got a flow meter on mine. I've got the it's like a clear tube with a little float in it almost, and it just rises up as you increase the flow, and it just
right, okay.
So it's plumbed in line. So it's actually from Royal Exclusive, which surprisingly is not extortionately expensive. Ozone, I am not convinced that ozone does anything for parasites. There'll be a lot of people out there who disagree with that.
Wow.
But my take on it is I run ozone for water clarity. I don't run it for disease treatment, really. I do think it probably kills bacteria. So my thinking is you don't get the contact time when we don't run it at a sufficiently high enough rate to break down the cell walls of things like ick, because in it, like I said earlier, it's about 12 to 15 microns. Bacteria 0.5 to 5, so they're considerably smaller. So I think it's possible that ozone will break down bacteria, but I'm not convinced that it would have a big effect, if any, on parasite load. That's just my personal. I think you'd have to run it a lot higher.
Yeah, I've read quite a bit about ozone, and I was going to do it for water clarity, but then I found out I'm killing as much good as I'm killing bad, so I decided to put it on the shelf and leave it alone.
That classic
let nature do its thing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, my take is it's like, I think it's, Doctor. You should speak to Dr. Tim. I know Paul just interviewed him recently.
Yeah, he's just done a cracking video. Yeah,
not a proponent of running UV at all on a system. But my take on it is, I mean, a lot of bacteria is surface bacteria and internal in the rock structure anyway. So I know the pelagic stuff is out in the water column, but you're never going to exterminate 100% of your bacterial load in your tank by running UV. You know what I mean? So even though if you compared my tank to your tank, you may have more bacteria circulating, but I still have bacteria. So all that happens is that my tank will adjust to the bacterial load that's there, because my UVs run constantly from day one. So that's just where my tank will sit. Your tank might sit just a bit higher, might have a different composition, but as I say, life finds a way. So it will just adjust.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And so to me, I just wanted the peace of mind of, running the UV. Hopefully it does absolutely nothing, because I've got nothing in the tank that it needs to be treating. But I just thought it's an extra backup.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, saying that, I've had that actually next month. I've had that Achilles tang in there for 3 years, and touch wood, I've never seen any problems at all with it, or the powder blue, or any of the others, really. So
I think another thing is to think where the fish are sourced from, aren't they? Because some fish come in and they are a lot healthier and a lot, should I say, not as healthy as others. Depends if you've got an LFS that
absolutely.
can get them from a reliable source and a good source. You know, bearing in mind these animals have been shipped, kicked in a box, whatever, on the back of a DHL van and carried wherever, haven't they? So
Yeah,
that's going to help.
yeah. I mean, I know most LFS get a lot of their fish through TMC, so I'd imagine probably 95% of my fish come via TMC. Even I use three LFS to buy my fish, basically, and even the distribution between those three is one of them probably did 80%, you know, and the 20% was spread between the others. I mean, the copper band I got from a particular shop, because he gets them in short supply chain. He brings them in, he gets like 25, 30 at a time, and he has them, and he brings them in small, and I can go to his shop, he will feed them, and I'll spend an hour, 2 hours in there before I select the one I want. So I think that's a great service.
What's Gaz saying? I love a powder blue. The only fish I haven't got that was on my list. Is it worth the fish adding last, even after QT 12 days?
Yeah.
Go on, Dr. Rob.
If you have, I don't know, I mean, you're not telling me anything about the size of the tank, anything else that's in there. I mean, I've also done a video on the fact that people go, add all your fish at once, which is fine if you can get all the fish you want in a short period of time. But the reality is most people can't do that, either financially or, you know, you just can't find the fish you want. So, you know, all the fish in my tank have taken, what, 2.5 years to accumulate all of the fish that I wanted.
Wow.
So I had no choice but to add my tangs sequentially. So the first tank I put in a mustard tang and a gem tang. They were the very first tangs that went in there, and then I just added one or two, you know, continually over the next 2 years.
220 litre water box by the look of this is what his tank is. Gaz's Reef.
Is that? Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why you can't. I mean, I guess my I don't know what that is in length, but I would say 6 foot would be a minimum for a powder blue, and even then, it won't grow to full size in a 6 foot tank.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you can absolutely put one in. But I would, if you've got existing fish, I don't know what other tangs you've already got in there, but I mean, also part of my QT really is an extension of that, is using an acclimation box. I just think sounds good. Yeah, I just think they save so much problem when you're introducing particularly tangs if you use an acclimation box. I mean, I use it for everything, but what I do with an acclimation box is I put the fish in and then I put my remote camera to look at that box, and then when I'm not in the fish room, I just look to see if there's any particular fish which are upset with the new guy in the box, and then I can gauge how long I think I should leave it in there, because I try to leave them in there minimum amount of time. I mean, I've seen people put like copper bands and things in tiny acclimation boxes for ages, and I think that is proper stressful for that fish. So I don't like to leave them in any longer than I have to. And then mine's got like little kind of slidey doors on it, and I would just take that door out in the evening, and then normally by the morning he's out. And I've not really had any, you know, other than convict tank. But even he was fine when he first went in. You know, none of the other fish. I've not had really any introductions where they've been absolutely hammered, other than wrasse and my 6 line.
Right, I'm going to get ready to wrap it up in a second, because we've got people leaving us. I think everybody's going out to do the shopping or cut the lawn or whatever, so we're getting on for just over an hour. Just finish it with this point here that John's making, which is very close to my heart. It would be better if LFS charged more for quarantined fish. Completely agree with you, John. I know there's a lot of commercial, financial sort of aspects to be considered there from a fish shop point of view.
It's a difficult subject.
with the 2 buckets that we talked about earlier, though, there's definitely no reason that people shouldn't be able to give that a go.
Yeah, I think it's the safest and the simplest route to go down with fish. I mean, like I said, I had great success with it, so I can't see why other people wouldn't.
Good. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Rob, for coming on and chatting about your experience. You definitely shared quite a few knowledgeable bits of information there for people. Definitely something I'm going to go at, and I hope everybody does take something from it and goes and make sure they've got 2 buckets and a heater and an air stone for on standby, because it's there's no reason why you ain't got one of those. I ain't got that in the cupboard. But no, thank you ever so much for joining, everybody. Thanks for giving up an hour on your Sunday morning. Much appreciate it. If you want to see me and Rob do anything else or any other topics, please post a comment, post a question or an idea in the comments section, and we'll see you all next Friday on the live stream. Are you going to join us next Friday, Rob? Have you got Friday free for a couple of hours? Fancy coming on next Friday?
On it.
Yeah. On it.
On it.
That'd be good to have you back on. Jay was saying he'd like to have you on again, so I thought now's the time we're talking about it, get you on. But no.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll talk to you about it during the week. But yeah, thanks ever so much again, everybody. Thanks for giving us an hour. Thanks for the support on the channel. Give us a thumbs up. Have a good weekend or what's left of your Sunday, and we'll speak to you all next week. All right. Take care, guys.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.